lot of soul.
This is Bass Talk Live. Your host, Mark Jeffries and Matt Pangrack. BTL is brought to you by Lowrance, Lose, Strike King Lures, Bass Cat Boats, Ducket Fishing, Spro, AFCO, Big Bite Baits, Sunline, and TH Marine. BTL coming at you. Good Tuesday, everybody. Welcome once again to another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we're going to talk bass fishing and anything else that we want to talk about. Yes, he is back in studio once again, Bradley Hallman. And Bradley, I got to tell you, man, last night was a first for me this year. We actually played a basketball game.
Really?
Yes, we finally got into it. And you know what it was like? I actually thought about this driving home. It's like that anticipation of the first tournament of the year.
Yeah.
Really is what it was like. The kids were fired up.
I
The
bet.
fans, we had fans there, which I was kind of surprised. Now, we only had X number of fans allowed, but just the whole strategy, the getting into it, it was really cool, man.
That's awesome.
It's been a long time coming. I know the kids were very anxious, just that whole buildup and everything, rather than what you and Matt are getting ready to go for. Well, Matt, I mean, you've got another one too, is the final open of the season at Lake Louisville. What are your thoughts, Matthew?
I don't know. I had this talk with someone else. So, like, you ever have that feeling going into one where you're just like, you can't visualize yourself catching them? Do you ever get this, Bradley? Like, you're going to a place and you can visualize yourself doing well.
Yeah.
I'm having difficulty visualizing myself on Lake Louisville.
I'm having a hard time getting past the conversation that we started before we even got on the air, which was about you wanting to do the layup in your fantasy fishing. And you did. You went for the layup.
We've had a very interesting morning, folks. So I come in. This will set the stage. I come in.
What are you doing? What path are you going down?
I'm going down all the paths. And, you know.
I don't think you want to do that. I really don't.
Let's not roll it.
Okay.
You can.
No, let's not.
Keep going, Matthew.
I started it with the layup that he
So
laid.
back to fantasy fishing.
Yeah, you and your layup.
I didn't lay up. I was trying to get as many points as necessary
You did the
to
same
win
thing? Yeah,
win
you
my local
played it
league.
safe.
Listen, if you're 800 points back and you know that you can't finish in the top 10 at Tackle Warehouse, but you're
Yeah.
still leading your little group, go for the win in the group and cut your losses, because even if you have a perfect score, there's no way you make up 600 points.
Yeah.
I'd played it safe all year and gotten in the top 100 points, and then had a bad one and was somewhere in the 300 to 400 range. And like I just wanted to shoot for it. So
But you picked our guest today.
I did.
You picked it. He told me, you said, this guy's going to do well here.
Yeah, I went with the guys that were low percentage, like 1%, and he was on there. And when I was done with my list, dude, it was hammer, 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 hammer. But I will say that Walters is the only one of all my hammers that pulled it off.
Really?
That's who we have on today, Patrick Walters, after his 104-pound performance, 30-pound victory. And you know what? You know I like to come up with some stats, right?
I like your stats.
Dude, there's some crazy stuff with Patrick Walters, and I know he's done a lot of interviews and done all this, and I don't think anyone has brought this up. The guy has never tanked in a professional tournament. Never.
Define tanked, Matt.
Okay, so like his lowest finish with bass is a 99th in Champlain in an open, and there were 200 boats in that open.
Oh, I can define tank.
That's what I'm saying, though. You wouldn't consider that a tank, would you?
No.
And he's finished like 120th or 30th in a couple FLW Costa or Toyotas at the time, but there were like 240 boats in it.
Right.
Like, he's never finished in the bottom like third of a tournament, ever. Like, ever. Take college into it, take opens, take elite series. You know, he's fishing a Forest Wood Cup. He's got the Bassmaster Classic under his belt. He's got both of those. He's done well in both of those. Like, he has never gone out and just had a disaster, ever.
Is he a savant?
He's not a savant. He just has never sucked, which if you look at my stats, I have sucked. Bradley, you are open to the fact that occasionally you will miss the boat.
Yeah, I kind of like my picks. Some of us have to swing. That was what the argument was about. Was like, dude, you've got to swing at some point.
But he also wins, so he obviously swings.
Yep, he does,
But,
obviously.
I mean, you've been doing this for 20 years. How impressive is it that, 60, 70 tournaments in, he's never had one where he just puts it on the trailer and goes, well, I missed it that time.
It's coming.
You think?
It comes for all at some point. It's extremely impressive with 60, 70 tournaments. Because that'd be the first thing I would say is, well, then how many events are you basing that
30,
off of?
33 in FLW, and then I think 40 on
Yeah, that's
40 on
that's
the
a very high number.
yeah, and he finished third in the Angler of the Year standings this year. Yeah, look at this. So 40 tournaments.
Yep.
And obviously Bass has it done. I mean, look at he's kind of started off, he's had some middle of the road finishes, but I mean there's no like what happened their tournaments, like scrolling all the way down. Look at that. There it is. That's it. And there are 200 boats in that one.
Yeah, it's extremely impressive.
Yeah.
Extremely.
So we kind of got into this yesterday, Matt. Was this the greatest performance in the history of the Elite Series from a margin of victory?
I didn't watch the show. I didn't
field?
watch the show yesterday, but I did hear that you guys had talked about that.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, that's a lot. 34 pounds. Is that what it was?
No, it was 29 or something, right at 30.
Right at 30
Or no,
pounds.
was it more than 30 pounds?
I think it was
It's a lot.
30-something.
Hold on.
Man,
He's pulling it
David
up.
Fritz had some blowouts like that. I remember Fritz having
29.
some
29
blowouts.
pounds.
Yeah, 75, 85, 95, 105, and he had 104, 12. So 29
Yeah.
pounds.
I wouldn't say that it's the biggest of all time because, I mean, I do think you're forgetting some of, like what I said, David Fritz's stuff when Fritz was in the Fritz.
Yeah, but that was pre-Elite Series. We were talking
Okay.
just Elite
2006
Series.
on.
Yeah.
As far as dominating wins, like with the way he did it in the morning, having 20 pounds. I mean, the last day it took him a
Right.
while to hit the 100, but
But
I
he
mean, dude,
basically-
you would pull up Bass Track at 8 a.m. and the guy would have 24 pounds and everyone else would have like 2 for 5.
So, I mean, different than others that have happened. I mean, he didn't even have to go out and fish the last day. It was over after day 3.
Yeah, he didn't have to go. He did not have to make a cast.
Mm-hmm.
And he had this stuff all to himself and was doing something unique.
What about Van Dam at Kentucky Lake? It was
It wasn't a 29 pounds.
No. Everybody was catching them on Van
Yeah,
Dam was catching
that's
them.
the thing. Not everybody was catching him here. I mean, you have Keith Combs, who's dominant, who
Yeah.
did not hit 80 pounds over 4 days.
Because he
Keith
had a
Combs
bad
did
day
not
one.
average 20 pounds a day on Lake Fork.
Well, he
Lee
only had-
Livesey did not average 20 pounds a day on Lake
What
Fork.
did Combs have on day one? Like 11 pounds?
Right.
Yeah.
It's an incredible number. I mean, anytime you go over 100 pounds, it's an incredible number. And I did not think that they were going to go over 100 before that tournament. Quite frankly, I thought the weights would be about where Combs and Yellis are. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, it's pretty special.
Which is still good. That's 18 pounds a day in the turnover.
Yeah, it's a lot of weight.
And here's the deal. He caught fish that were suspended fish. The
No,
most difficult fish to try and catch.
No, he's tapping into the new technology and throwing it out there to the world.
Yeah.
It was extremely impressive. He's used that technology now, so for both wins, because I was at the first event and hands down, I mean, the live scope was the big player for myself and the guys
At
that
Hartwell?
I know that finished in the top 10, and I didn't talk to him about it, but I'm sure that it
At the Open on Hartwell that he won.
100%.
Yeah, because he's won the Open
So
on
then-
Hartwell and this event
So
in the past
then
month.
we were at. I mean, I'm just using the times that I've fished against him that I know that it was a big player. We just came from Cherokee, and it was a player there, and he was doing well in that event. So, obviously, the boys got his Garmin live scope down pat, and using it to his advantage.
He finished 10th at Cherokee.
Yeah.
I'm sure the discussion is going to continue, Bradley, about whether or not this type of technology is needed at the highest level of competition. Now, let me say this real quick. I have totally done a 180 on this.
Yeah.
I think it's good for the game. I think it's good for the anglers.
Yep.
If you don't adapt
Yep.
and learn how to utilize the technology, and if all the other companies don't catch up or surpass
Right.
where the technology is today, you're going to get left behind.
It's no different than having a secret cricket back in the day. It's everything that you can do to get an edge. And right now, that edge seems to be in technology, right? And it's been that way. I mean, that's been
Yeah.
the trend for a little while now. And that's really where it is. And it is an edge. it's not going to play all the time. It doesn't matter all the time. There are places that we go that it really doesn't help you that much. Arkansas River is a perfect example.
Oh, it helped me.
Did it?
Oh, yeah, because I would not have had a prop on my trolling motor without being able to see in front of the boat. I use it to see where the bottom is.
Do you?
Oh, 100%.
That's interesting. Now, a fan sent me an email, Bradley.
I use it to keep from running the
I
ground.
can't
Or
believe
if
he
there's
just said that.
a stump in front of the boat, you're
Well,
like,
yeah.
oh, I'm going to kick it to the right.
Okay, I follow that. Yeah.
I mean, I've done a lot less. I used to go through 2 or 3 trolling motor props a season.
I'm just talking about for as a huge advantage in tournament fishing. It's not going to play everywhere all the time.
You're hard on stuff, Matthew, sometimes.
But I'm not. Well, I guess maybe I am. But I'm not. I don't feel like I am.
It's that new navigation system.
I don't feel like I'm hard on stuff. Like you talk to me and stuff during tournaments. Am I ever like, oh, dude, I pushed into this area or I ran this or I went where this other boat wouldn't go? I'm all just floating around in the open.
Brad has no comment.
I have no comment.
All right, real quick, Bradley, I received an email from a fan, and this is kind of an interesting take. He said, I do not want to see the elimination of electronics in the top level professional fishing. But what if there was a limit on how much money in electronics you could have on your boat? In other words, if they put a cap on it, retail, they say, okay, this unit is valued at $4,000. This unit is valued at $6,000, whatever the number is.
Right.
And then you say, okay, you cannot exceed $15,000 or $10,000 or whatever the number is in electronics. What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
I didn't mean to stump you, man.
Well, I mean, I haven't given it a lot of thought. I know that
Yeah.
it's a controversy that's out there. I know that Blockett put the video out there, and while I do get everyone's point about the cost of the entire sport is extremely high. It's not just electronics. If you get it down to where they can only have 2 grass instead of 4 or 5 or 6, you're only going to affect a small percentage of the field that really want 4, 5, 6 or grass. You see what I'm saying? The guys that want to run multiple brands. I've got friends that have got, which you guys have seen them on magazine articles and TV shows and live, where they've got 3 different brands up front. So it is it an advantage if those guys know how to use it? It is. But there's a lot that goes into using all those units, and each one is totally different.
Let me say
There's
this.
a huge learning curve.
A lot of the guys who you see now, who have the 3 units up front or the multiple units, guess what they did before they had multiple units up front? They still caught fish and won tournaments.
Yes.
It's like, I look at it kind of like the A-rig. You've got kind of this deal where it's like, oh, all these schmoes are just going out and chucking it. But guess what? The A-rig's out, and the same guys who were winning on Grand before the A-rig are now winning on Grand with the A-rig. And there's a bunch of guys with 3 units who aren't catching them. Like, fish catching people catch fish. And, yeah, it can be an advantage and stuff, but I don't think you can use the electronics to make an angler.
But it takes the advantage away from anglers who learned how to do it the old school way. So let's use some other examples in this, okay? So let's say the guy that grew up on the Ozarks, Table Rock, up there in those clear lakes,
Bull Shoals, Lake of the Ozarks.
learned how to Lake of the Ozarks. That's one I got stumped on. But they learned how to jerk, okay? So back in the 80s, Mike McClellan's a perfect example, okay? Somebody who is extremely proficient with a jerk bait in their hand, okay? And they know if they take that thing out in the winter to early spring, that they are going to have the best opportunity of anyone out there to win tournaments, right? And McClellan's done that. Along comes the A-rig. Now I've got guys winning tournaments that had never won tournaments this time of year because the A-rig allowed them to expose fish that they weren't able to present baits to before, okay? Now, the A-rig kind of ran its course, and it's not as dominant as it once was. While it still has its time and season, we see that. That's going to be the same way with certain electronics. It's going to be their time and season, but it's not just going to be the over runaways like what we're seeing. This is early on, so that's what you're seeing early. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're seeing the A-rig right now in November of 2011 on Lake Gunnersville on Paul Elias's boat deck on the bridge.
In its infancy, at a major event where everyone else is not using it, okay? Or they don't completely understand how to use it. I mean, we're talking about a guy that obviously I'm looking at his track record and I know what went down in a couple of those other tournaments that he won and top 10, and they were huge live scope tournaments, okay? And if you had them, then it separated you from the field. If you understand how to use them, it allowed you to connect and put baits and present baits in front of fish that normally you would not be able to.
Yeah, Maynard brought up on the instant feedback the Alabama rig. He brought that up. He was like, look, okay, the advantage that you have using the umbrella rig, they took that away and said, no, we're not going to use that.
I mean, it's also live site, too, because you look at the guys like it's at Sam Raybird and stuff. Those guys, a couple of the guys who finished at the top had it's any forward-facing technology at this point.
And it's not only that. So this was the reason I started down this road. So now let's come back to electronics. So then we're going to take a guy like okay, Aaron Martens, who was one of the very best original down 2D sonar drop shotters in the world, right? We all agree on that. It was amazing how quick, watching him on TV or on video, how quickly he understood how everything laid out just from a 2D standpoint, okay? When side imaging came along and then live scope came along, I can honestly tell you when live scope first came out and I first had it in my boat, that was the first time I was like, dude, like my learning curve now, just like you gave me an A-rig and I can compete against Mike McClellan without having to completely figure it out. Now I can figure out the same things that A-Mart was looking at much quicker, because now I'm looking, I mean, it just, the way the whole thing goes down, the learning curve in your mind is much faster. Much faster. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm interested in this, Bradley. When you guys are all together, in your groups. Oh, by the way, the feast, food-wise, that you guys have in your YouTube videos and everybody's quite the festival of food there, my friend.
It's not every night like that, but we definitely have some nights.
Did you see that, Matt?
Yeah. Well, Scott's got to get the Traeger in now.
Yeah.
Jeez.
It's awesome.
Oh, it was unbelievable, the food that you guys were doning up there. Anyway, do you guys talk about, rather than, I'm on this pattern or I'm on, do you talk about, hey, man, here's what I saw. This is what I've seen. Does that make sense? The crossover or the advancement of actual discussion that takes place when you guys work together?
Yeah, we're still talking about electronics here?
Yeah.
Dude, I'll be honest, this Walters win really, I mean, not that it hasn't been out of the bag, but like he pushed it on out. And guys just haven't been talking about it. I mean, if you go back to Scott was one of the first ones. Like, Scott was first one in my boat whenever we were at our boat.
I remember you calling me and saying,
he spun dude, we were in the middle of nowhere.
You said,
he spun a trolling
so
motor, and he was
screwed.
like, I wonder if those are bass. And there's two blobs sitting out over 40 foot of water, but they're only 10 foot deep. And he reached in his rod box and grabbed just a spinning rod with a wacky worm on it and throws it over there. And as soon as you saw that worm go down and you saw that bass turn, I was like, good God, they're bass. Yeah, it was a 5-pounder. The guy's been doing it for a lot longer than most, okay? Now, he's tied with a Garmin, and he's had that deal. But, I mean, if you go back to he won Cumberland and FLW Tour on camera, on live, he was catching
flooded
them
bushes
with
a jerk bait.
With live scope, with a jerk bait out of trees.
So there was
same thing he's
2-year period. It was before.
So how many years ago was that? 3 years ago?
It was before live scope. It was Panoptics.
It was Panoptics.
And I was watching all of Scott's
Which,
stuff.
by the way, is the same thing, and it worked just as well. The only difference is you're looking at a 2D screen as opposed to...
But I remember this, and I think I've even told you about this. Scott wouldn't say anything about it.
That's right.
But that sucker would not make a cast if it wasn't lined up with the head of his trolling motor.
Yeah.
I mean, you would watch him. And this was 3-4 years ago. And I'm like, dude, this guy's seeing all these fish, but he's one of 5 guys on a 200 boat tour.
Yeah.
And I mean, dude, how's a guy standing there not fishing for 30 seconds? And I watched him do this on Neely Henry too, and then make a cast and catch
guys
it.
weren't talking about it because I know other guys, other friends of mine. Jason won an event at St. Clair, I believe. Was that an Elite Series?
That was when he was snapping the tube, when he was seeing the fish and he was casting it out there on the tube.
That was the same thing. That was live scope. So or
what was that, 18, 17, 18?
Yeah. Well, this is what I'm getting at. It's been there for a while, but now it's just like full blown. So, I mean, it's been going on for a while.
It is a race, though, with the other companies to try and advance as quickly as possible.
There's no doubt that's
to
going
get
on.
that better image.
But is it not like the kind of the same deal when Steve Kennedy and Van Damme and stuff in 07, 06, 07, 08, like where guys who freaking understood side imaging and they're like, dude, watch this. I can go across a point and see where the brush pile is.
So
And everyone else isn't, and they're still going, and those guys are just going, zoop, 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 and they're like, dude,
I mean, the first
we're
guys
kicking your ass on the piles.
guys that figured out the TVA and the side imaging and were able to idle the ledges and be able to see fish, how many fish, they could count them, and they could even tell the size of the fish. Those were the first guys that were way, way ahead of everyone else.
07, 08,
That's
09, KVD made Kentucky Lake at the TVA.
Right.
He owned them.
Between it and Barkley, you're talking about 200,000 acres, and he could bring it down just like that. And that's what he was doing.
It's going to get better, too. You know it is.
It's pretty good right now, Bubba.
I know, but it's going to get better. It will. I mean, that's the race that all these companies have is to make it better than the other guys.
But here, I'll say this again. This guy in the queue who we're going to have on,
yeah.
he was out there fishing with Geddes in college, winning national championships, top 10 in tournaments, winning stuff, and he didn't have anything on the front of his boat too. So it's still the guys who catch him still catch him. It's a natural progression of the sport. Some guys pick up on it. Some guys it suits their style. Some guys will catch him where it doesn't suit their style. I think there'll always be a Tommy Biffle, a Denny Brower guy who can survive at it. I think there'll always be kind of the hybrid guys, and then I think there'll always be that kind of Paul Mueller cutting edge advanced guy that can survive. It's the beauty of our sport. The goal is to finish first, and there's no quote right way to get it done.
That's right.
You can do it hard-headed, flipping, angry, grumbling at him the whole time like Bradley Hallman's done in the past. You can do it live scoping them like Patrick Walters. You can do it finesse fishing like Aaron Martens. You can do a combination of it like Brandon Pollinet.
Yes.
Dude, I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit. If you don't adapt to this technology, you're going to get left behind. All right? You cannot continue to win.
I disagree because
At
it's all
that
going to
level.
come full circle where everyone's relying on technology, and then all of a sudden,
I've seen it happen
the
in
lack
other
of
sports,
technology,
dude.
no one's going to be flipping to that stuff that you don't have to use
Like I
technology.
say, everything has a time and a place, and everything has a time and a place. The bank will never go away. It
Yeah.
will always play.
You can
Right.
always win a tournament on the bank.
Okay, then go fish the bank at Louisville.
Give me all the
and get it
technology
done.
I want. I'm not beating Chris Jones on the Arkansas River, and you could take every damn graph off of his boat.
That's a totally different situation.
Like I said, it's situational, and there's
Yeah.
there's always opportunities. It will depend on the reservoir
All
and
right.
time of year.
I agree with that. All right, I'm good with that. All right, we're going to take a break. Come back with our special guest here on Tuesday, Patrick Walters. Coming up, everybody. We'll be right back.
The ultimate fishing system starts with Lowrance HDS Live. The best fish finding tools, from chirp sonar and fish reveal to side scan and down scan imaging, and complete touchscreen control from your trolling motor to your big motor.
We've paired one of the most iconic hulls in the history of bass boats with a proven lineup of trusted accessories. We're bringing you best-in-class value and performance, leaving others in your wake. Turnkey value, turnkey performance. The Pantera 2 is an overachiever in the 19-foot category. Once you hit the throttle, you'll feel the rush, and there's no looking back.
Kevin, what are you doing here?
Oh, I'm just filling in for Billy.
I need a 660 shad crankbaits in the Series 5 model.
We're out.
You're not out. You got all kinds of them right there.
We're out.
Kevin, I need 6.
Have a lollipop.
I do not want a lollipop.
Have a lollipop.
Do you have it in sexy shad color?
Let's face it, fishing electronics are no longer an afterthought. They've become a necessity. And at the Bass Take, our experts match you with the right electronics, provide professional installation, and educate you to help maximize your catching results while providing support along the way. Because let's be honest, it's about catching, not just fishing. And when you're ready for better results, join the Bass Tank team. Visit us today on Facebook or go to thebasstank.com.
Hey everybody, Tide Faircloth here. Want to show you one of my favorite braided lines, SX1 30-pound Sunline braid. I use this braided line for a couple of different applications, and one of my favorites to use for this line is a swim jig. Casts great, and it's small diameter, and just works really great on a swim jig. Another technique I like to use for 30-pound SX1 Sunline braid is whenever I'm flipping like a light, say an 1/8 to a 1/4 ounce weight in grass, small diameter, I don't lose much action on my worm, just works great in those scenarios. So if you're looking for a braided line for a swim jig or fishing a light Texas rig, check out Sunline's SX1 30-pound braid.
AFCO's new Uri performance shirts are made out of a new fabric. Aeromesh technology, Aeromesh fabric, really breathable. You know, it just doesn't stick to you whenever you're sweating. It's 105 in Florida. You know, you got sun beating down, there's hardly any wind. You know, your shirt won't stick to your back or anything like that. Any little breeze gets through it, and all the AFCO features that you like with the hood, not without a hood, depending on which one you like. It's got odor technology, so your pits don't stink whenever you're sweating. It has thumb loops. So whenever you're driving down the lake, 70 miles an hour on a bass boat, you got the thumb through here, sleeves won't roll up, so you have no excuse if you get sunburned. Any little breath of air gets through and cools you down, so make sure you check them out. Any fish, any water, any condition, AFCO has you covered.
He's got his own monogram trophy case.
All right, we are back on a Tuesday. Bradley Hallman in studio, and it is time to go to our special guest. And I've had a couple of issues with the software all of a sudden, but he is here, so let's try and bring him in now. Let's see. Patrick, you there, man?
Guys, what's going on? How y'all doing this morning?
All right, everything is working great. Thanks for taking time out. And first of all, dude, one of the most impressive performances I've ever seen in the history of the Elite Series. Just unbelievable.
Thank you. Truly, it was just an unbelievable week from start to finish. Just how everything it was like you weren't even in control. It happened for some reason. Like you were just, listen, the train left the station, and I was just along for the ride that week.
All right, let me ask you this. In practice, did you know this train was going to show up?
I knew I was going to catch fish. The biggest fish I caught in practice was like 3.5 pounds. I actually caught it shallow on a Zoom swim bait, but I knew the fish were there because I could catch 2 and 3 pounders pretty consistent. And like the first pocket I pulled into, I had 2 of them come chase a jerkbait that were, I mean, you can tell when they're good fish. And so I was like, you know what, it's going to be on. And I lost one good one in practice the first day, which was like about a 6 pounder. And after that, I ran around the lake looking for areas that had life, stretches where all the kind of fish were located, kind of canceling out the dead water. And I called Emily on day 2. I've never called her really before and talked really about fishing or practice. I said, babe, you know, I feel pretty good about it. I feel like I can catch fish. You know, I don't know if I'm going to catch some big fish. I was thinking I was going to go out there and catch 15 pounds a day. Hopefully I have a chance to go and catch 17. But after I started leaning on them, I was like, man, they're better than I thought they were.
All right, Matt, one more question, then I'll send it over to you. Patrick, why the jerkbait?
Why not a jerkbait? You know, jerkbait just gets them fired up. You know, in practice, my main goal was 6 months ago when they announced Lake Fork was going to be in the fall. I even talked to Lee Livesey. I told everybody, I told my dad, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to fish for a truck. I'm going to fish standing timber. I'm going to throw a giant swim bait and a giant wacky worm the whole time and just fish for isolated big fish. That was my game plan the whole time going into that tournament. And when I started fishing the timber, I was like, holy cow, there's not single fish out here. There's a lot of fish. I had no idea there was that much potential really out there. I was just fishing for one fish. And turns out majority of the fish in the lake, I feel like we're out there.
Oh, wow.
What was your hook to land ratio? Because, I mean, anybody who's fished knows anything over 1.5 pounds on a jerkbait. I mean, very rarely were these fish cigared, you know. It wasn't like jerkbait headfirst down their throat. You mean you were like dancing around, crawling around behind the motor, yelling at your cameraman, going, no, 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 and then yes, yes, yes. I mean, but it seemed like you got every single one of them in.
What's weird is that kind of jerkbait setup and how everything works with that. If you can hook them and you get them through the initial load of that rod, when that rod loads up and he doesn't pull off, I didn't lose hardly any fish. Besides, I popped one off. The final day, I lost one also that hung up on a stump. But other than that, I didn't lose any fish that jumped off. Besides one, I did lie. On day one, Dalton, the camera guy, pulled up on me, and I threw in there, pulled one off, threw back in there, hooked one, had like a 3.5 coming to the boat. He jumped off. I said, Dalton, if I lose one more fish, I said, you got to go ahead and get on. I said, I don't care if I just lose, you got one more chance. I said, if I lose one more, you got to leave. I said, I don't care. You just bring me bad luck. And then I threw back in there and caught another like 3.5. But if you can get them on that initial load and they don't pull off, it was very good. I'd say every day I'd have like 10 to 12. Just the big fish, what they do, they would just touch it. Like they would like peck at it. And it was almost like they hit the top of it. And if they touched it and they felt that it was a hard bait, instantly they'd go straight to the bottom. I'm talking about 20 feet, quick as they could go. You wouldn't get another chance. Like smallmouth, they'll come back and eat it again, but they would just nip at it and then they'd leave. But if you got that initial load and it didn't pull out, you had them.
Wow. What, if any, modifications were you making to the jerkbait?
Just changing hooks. I wanted the sharpest hooks possible because those big fish, I mean, I don't feel like they wanted to eat because that's why I had to catch them on a jerkbait. In practice, I threw every swim bait I owned. I threw Depths 250s. I threw big S wavers. I threw the Stormarashi Glide. I threw that Babe XPS swim bait. I threw big mag, the 10-inch mag draft, 8-inch mag draft, 6-inch mag draft, the Zoom swimmer, the 3/8 swim bait. I threw 3-inch swim baits. Honestly, you should have seen the trash pile that I had after each day. Every swim bait, I'm throwing DT20s, DT10s, square bills. It didn't matter. I just couldn't get them to bite it. I don't know why, but being able to see how I could react, they were reacting. They chase a swim bait every single day, but they would not commit.
Real quick then, were you bringing your bait to the fish or were the fish coming to your bait?
That's basically the same thing. I'm
big difference. Were you putting your bait in front of fish?
To them, and then they're chasing it for 40 feet.
But they were chasing it. You were. I'm just saying. I mean, you weren't making a cast saying here one comes. Were you making a cast saying I'm bringing it to this fish and forcing it to react?
It's both, basically. I'm throwing. There's a stump, and I got that stump at 80 feet out. I'm throwing it 100 feet, and so for 20 feet, I'm working the bait, and it's getting to it. Mainly, it's getting to the right depth where that fish is sitting, and then you almost got to trigger him because I could throw in there 7 times and he wouldn't move. But finally, when I got that cast dialed in on that log, whichever way he was facing or how he was positioning, they'd almost like rub him. You know, they just twitch. Yeah, I mean, Brad knows what I'm talking about. When they twitch that one time and they start doing it, then they'd sit there and they'd chase it for 50 feet. And you just had to work and they'd just sit there and, I mean, I call them dancing. They're sitting there dancing on it, and then finally he's got it. And see, that's the thing. They don't want to eat. But you just got to sit there and you got to keep at it, and then you just get it inside of the face or something. I mean, you just had to force feed them.
Wow. Patrick, there are thousands of trees, standing timber, logs, laydowns on Lake Fork. What was special about this area?
I think the bait was in there. The fish were just really in there that week. You know, the main thing I was looking for was point trees, trees that were like going into a pocket, like a secondary point where it would be like a gut where everybody's fishing, like the trees on the sides of the points or something. It would be like a gut tree. It'd be in the middle of a pocket and they'd be staging on that thing, just catching everything going in and out, or the furthest one out. And the best trees were the ones you couldn't see. I did catch some really good fish off trees that were the furthest one sticking out, a bushy tree or something. But that one that was the furthest one out a little bit further, that where everybody's boat's usually sitting at that one, they're like, oh, dang, I didn't even see that one. That one, when you cast it to it 100 feet away, was the one they were usually sitting on. You just couldn't see it with your eye.
My question was kind of in the deets of that as well. So, like depth-wise, I'm sure that some of your trees ranged in depth as far as when I say depth, I'm talking about the overall from the surface to the bottom. How deep were some of the areas that you were fishing?
that was the biggest thing. Everybody wanted to know depth. Like, well, how fit, there was no cure-all on the type of tree.
That's what I figured.
I caught them in 2 foot, and day 1 and 2, I caught them over 45. I had a couple trees that were, I'm talking middle of the lake that I just found it was a tall tree, and it was in the middle of nowhere. But if it got within 5 foot of the surface, when you get in that, a couple of them were like in 35. It was mainly, I'd say 20 to like 8 foot were the good ones. But there's a couple that you could get out there in 35 foot, and every tree would be 10 foot below the surface. Like you could see them. It almost would cut off, and then there'd be one tree in the middle of nowhere that was 3 feet below the surface, and they'd be sitting on that one tree.
Yep. All right, man. On the final day, obviously, you had it wrapped up early. I mean, technically, you didn't even have to go fish. But I'm curious, toward the end of the day, that fury that took place that final hour, why did you make the move that you made?
Because I could see how the fish were acting. That's the biggest thing is it was cloudy. It was overcast for majority of the day. The jerkbait fishing is usually always better with sun. And I was out there fishing. The fish were still there on those deeper trees and on the 10 to 30 foot trees. And I was out there fishing, and you could draw them off of the stump and stuff, and they'd be following the bait, and they'd follow it for 40 feet. And it was the most aggravating thing. I mean, it's frustrating because they're sitting there, follow it, and you can see how big they are, and they just get so close to the bait, and they just almost touch it. Like the bait and the fish turn into one blob, and you're just like, okay, he wasn't on there. And then you start twitching again, and then they'll just leave. I mean, I had probably 15 to 20 fish do that. And I was like, okay, well, I had a lull every single day from 9 to 11. And so once I got past that lull, I was like, let's see if they'll start biting. And they still kept chasing it and kept chasing it. And I said, you know what, I'm not going to force it. I compare fish to women a lot. If she ain't in the mood, she's going to be fired up. No matter what you say or what you do, you ain't going to please her. So you just got to learn to listen to that sometimes. Pay attention, And so when that fish isn't in the mood, I'm like, hey, I'm just going to pull the plug and go do something different. And I was like, well, if I've been fishing deep all day, I'm going to go shallow. And I pulled there and shallow, and they were ready.
Wow.
Like that electronics can help with the success there too, but never mind.
It's for everybody.
Never mind. It just goes somewhere.
Wow.
It sounds like, based on reading some of the articles that you've done interviews with, that you were not like spooked, but kind of surprised that no one else was on the same game plan heading into this thing.
Truly, because it wasn't, I didn't have one area. Everywhere on the lake I went, I felt like I could catch fish. Everywhere. I mean, it did not matter. I truly feel like Lake Fork had that many fish in it. I go in the left finger, the middle, the right. Everywhere I went, they were just there. So I'm like, how is nobody else catching these fish, Because I'm not the only one running a live scope, When we were at St. Clair, I think out of the top 40 guys who made it, only like 6 guys didn't have it. So everybody's running it. It's just another tool in the shed that when you learn how to utilize it and when not to use it, because I am a shallow water fisherman at heart. If I'm deeper than 3 feet, I'm deep. And the reason for that is that I always love seeing my bait, knowing what I'm doing. I fish shallow. Santee Cooper's my home pond. And so now when I can see my bait all the time, no matter how deep I'm fishing, I've always cast the structure. I'm a structure fisherman. It doesn't matter how deep I'm fishing anymore now because I know what my bait's doing. I always feel like bait awareness is the biggest thing in fishing. People don't really realize it. When fishing deep or fishing shallow, it's easier shallow because you're watching that spinnerbait come back the whole time. You're twitching your blades, you see what your bait's doing, and you're like, okay, all right, I'm going to reel by that tree, and that's when he's going to bite it. And you have that bait awareness. And then when you get deeper, it's hard to keep that awareness of where's that bait at. Because like y'all were talking about side scan, that's the biggest thing. You scan over it and you see the rocks, and then you see that one brush pile and into that point, and you back off, and you want that, you throw that big worm in there, and you're like, all right, you're picturing that bait down there the whole time. Like, all right, I'm in the pile, and you're picturing the fish looking at it. Well, now I'm not, you're still imagining it, but I'm looking exactly what's going on all the time. All right, my bait's 5 feet from that pile. Okay, I'm gonna hop it into the pile. All right, I'm going over top of it. That bait awareness is there 24/7.
Wow. All right, I'm curious, man. Weeks, months, years. How long did it take you to get truly dialed in on how to use your electronics?
Well, I'd say years just to learn all electronics. I mean, it takes you a long time. it's every day using them. Every piece of electronics is different. I mean, for me, it is a full-time job. This is what I do for a living. And so I'm out there every day. You're just playing with it. And it's time on the water is definitely the biggest thing of just learning how to use it. It takes, I'd say, 6 months to a year to get dialed in on when to use stuff and when not to. Because there's times when it'll absolutely hinder you because you're sitting there staring at it like, oh, my God, there they are. But you just have to shut it off and just go fishing, or when to use size scan, or when to use your 360. There's a time and place for everything. It truly does take a little bit of time on the water and experience to kind of figure that out.
Yep.
How much time for you, Brad?
Well, I've had it. So, I've had it a long time. I've had it since it was Panoptics, and I guess they still call it Panoptics Live Scope, but it was the old screen. It's a learning curve because I wasn't one that just took it. I was kind of like the guy that got the Cinco the first time, and I put the bag of Cincos in my rod box, and it rode around for 2 years before I ever tied one on. I wasn't quite as bad with this, but I wasn't seeing the success with it. I was a lot of like what Patrick's talking about, where, I could see them, but at some point it's wasting my time, and I've got to get to finding fish. And I would go back to the bank. I, like you, am a very visual angler. Very visual. That's why I enjoy fishing the bank. That's why I like Google Earth. That's why I'm visual. And I, like you, as this thing has progressed with me, I like being able to see everything that's happening. Like, even if they're not biting you, just like with the swim bait stuff you were talking about, because that's really where I was thinking, why didn't he throw a swim bait on those fish? Because I would think then it's a single hook. Anyway, obviously you answered that question. You tried them all, but you get to see the reaction as well. You know what I mean? You get to see them turn their nose and not.
I think that is
not interested.
Thing is the reaction. Just like you said, you can tell how they act. That's how you can tell bait selection, bait colors.
That's right.
I mean, you can start truly dialing it in like that, and that's I think one of the biggest things.
Yep.
Were you frustrated with sometimes you would see, a very large fish and it just wouldn't react? How long did you spend on that fish that you never did catch?
Everyone was different. A lot of times those big fish, it was frustrating when you could finally get them to react, and she would chase it 30 feet. I mean, you can tell when they're over 5 pounds. I mean, it's just a blob out there. I mean, and they would follow it. And those real giant ones they would move so slow, they would never even get close to the bait. They'd be 3 feet behind it the whole time, and they would just follow it. And so that was the frustrating thing. But I know the first day, it was actually kind of surprising. I blew my marshal's mind because I was actually in the back of a creek fishing some timber that they had some shad pushed in there. It was actually in the back of Little Caney. And there was one fish that was off of the timber a little ways, and I just saw him swimming. And so I was like, that's a good one. I'm going to chase this one. I started throwing at him, and I guess I was behind him or, didn't have my cast lined up, and I started chasing him. And I chased him for probably 5 minutes, and I chased him for 200 yards out of the pocket, out of the creek. I mean, it was just kept casting at him. And finally, you're thinking, like, maybe this is just not a bass. Maybe it's a catfish or a carp. And then I finally, when that bait got in front of him, you could tell that I finally made the right cast where angle and everything was right, because he instantly turned on. You could see that blob turn bright red, and he chased it and ended up catching him, and it was a 4-pounder. And that was day one. And that's when I was like, wow.
Chasing
for
bogeys.
200 yards, chased him.
Wow.
Easter eggs. So we call it crappies when they're just suspended out there. Yep. You're just like, there's an Easter egg.
Yep.
Huh.
Wow.
I talked a little bit about this before we had you on. I want to get your thoughts on it. You got roughly 75 tournaments under your belt, and I'll throw the collegiate stuff in there because you kicked everyone's butt in college pretty regularly. But, I mean, you started out in this thing young, Toyotas, Costas, whatever, Opens, all sorts of stuff. And I mean, I'm looking back through your stats, and you've never just had a disaster. That I could find in the stats. I mean, yeah, you've had some middle-of-the-road finishes, but you're talking limits, 100th place out of 200 boats or 60th place out of 150. For the average guy, I mean, dude, I finished last place in club tournaments. I've had disasters. I mean, like, you don't zero. You don't come in oftentimes with less than a limit. Your bad finishes are middle of the pack. Is there a formula to that? How have you been able to do that? Brad and I were both like, that's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my theory is always, even going through college, I've always felt like consistency pays the bills. And so I've always tried to be a very consistent angler. And that was always my mindset. I'm always going to catch a limit, and I always try to beat the fish. I don't fish against any anglers. I don't care who's fishing in the field. I'm going to beat the fish every single day to catch what I think I can catch with the most fish in that lake that day. And I throw a lot of rods. I keep 14 rods on deck minimum, even if I'm dialed in. I caught every single fish in the tournament that I weighed in on a jerkbait. I caught some on some other things, but I still had, I think, 17 rods on deck. I had 3 different swim baits, 2 DTs. I had a DT20, a DT6, or DT10, a square bill, glide baits. I had a drop shot. I had a flipping bait. I always feel like you have to keep the fish honest. You got to let the fish do the talking, and they're going to tell you each day what they want. And so I don't go out there with 2 rods. That's just not me. I've never been that guy. I'm going to have 15 rods on deck, and I'm going to try everything. It might be for 2 casts. I might pick it up and throw it back. That's not right. And then put it back down. But that rod's going to be on deck ready to roll. If a situation presents itself, I'm going to make the right cast with the right bait that I feel like to catch that fish.
Hey, real quick, I've got a couple other questions, but your internet connection is kind of went downhill. I don't know what happened. You're all kind of blurry and stuff. Let's do this. Why don't you close out of it and then re-click on the link again, and then we'll bring you back in.
Perfect.
All right, sounds good. All right, so we'll have him back here just in a few minutes. But, hey, man, it is time on the water, just like he says.
Yeah.
Education, training. That's why I asked you that one question about whether or not you guys talk from what you're seeing, because that is different.
Guys weren't talking as much 2 years ago because the few that had it figured out weren't going to talk about it very much.
Yeah.
And it's technology, and it's an edge. And like I say, there's different edges in all different parts of the sport. And when guys find that edge, they're not going to talk about it.
And then the word gets out, and then it explodes.
Yeah, I mean, there are times that you can't just hide exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's obvious to a lot of us what's going on with Patrick with his finishes recently.
Yeah.
And the technology that would have played there.
Like
All
I
right,
said,
you're back now,
I
man.
just want to keep pointing out, look at his finishes before this technology.
No,
you cannot
100%.
put this on the technology. It's a combination of the two. And I remember,
Right.
so we were friends. I'm friends with Geddes all the time. I remember Dave Rush at South Carolina, 3-4 years ago, would always be sending me pictures. Patrick he's back now, loves the front deck with just hogs, just holding 4 or 5 of those at a time. And I would always get these screenshots, just be like, dude, this guy fishes every freaking day. And I mean, this is before you were on the Elite Series and all that. I mean, your time on the water is up there with like a Brandon Polinick who did that. I mean, to get that good at that young. I mean, you're 10, 12, 15 days in a row. You're fun fishing on Santee Cooper, all those Carolina lakes. I mean, with nothing on the line, right?
Oh, absolutely. I always feel like you have to fish as much as possible, whether I'm saltwater fishing for redfish. I mean, I just love fishing in general. I mean, and tell you the truth, I love catching fish, but I feel like finding fish is an even bigger addiction for me. I love finding the next bite, how to catch them, the biggest school in the lake or something. And what's weird is I'll find them and I'll catch a couple and I'll just lean off of them. I don't even sit there and catch them because I'm like, that's what I went to achieve that day, was how to catch them, how to find them, what was the bite. And then I'm like, for some reason, it's a problem, I feel like, because I'm like, I should actually lean on them a little more sometimes and enjoy them. But I'm like, I might save them for a tournament or something. But I can't even fish local tournaments anymore, so they'll end up moving and just doing something different. But I just love finding fish for some reason.
All right, I'm curious. You mentioned saltwater fishing. We've had Shaw Grigsby on multiple times. He said saltwater fishing actually helps him become a better bass angler. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my dad and I grew up saltwater fishing, inshore and offshore. That's just what we did. And then I got into bass fishing probably in about the 6th or 7th grade. But just red fishing in general, sometimes in trout fishing, it would blow your mind how shallow a school of redfish will get on an oyster bed. It'll be 1 foot. The boat is dragging and kicking up dirt, and there's 20 redfish that you can't even see right there, and you just cast in there and they're less than a foot of water. So it just shows you the potential of how shallow fish will get, because you can catch bass in, I'd say, 6 inches of water. It doesn't matter. It almost feels like their back is out of the water. Like when you go up north and you're fishing docks and you're like, there's no way there's a bass under that dock, and you skip it in there. Oh my God, it's a 3-pounder. And you're like, how did you not see him? So just learning how shallow fish will get, and just fishing behaviors in general. I think just fishing in general helps, no matter what it is.
We catch them here. We call them so shallow that their mouth's full of dirt when you bring them in. Because when you set the hook, they're so shallow their mouth, they just scooped it all the way to the boat.
Straight up mud.
Wow. You mentioned that Santee Cooper was your home lake. How much fishing on that lake has helped you become a better angler?
I'd say a good bit, but honestly, I think traveling across the country in general and fishing different bodies of water is what's made me learn more about Santee Cooper than just fishing Santee Cooper as a whole. Because I remember when I was just getting into high school, Dad and I went on vacation. Like during my spring breaks, we would go fishing. Everybody went to the beach and hung out and stuff. Me and Dad, we would go to Guntersville. That was the first time I went to Guntersville. Was me and him in spring break. That's all we did was fish all week. We would go to Okeechobee, and that's when they were like, man, that flipping bite's the deal down there. And I'm like, I don't even know what flipping is. I mean, like, what are you talking about flipping? And they're like, you got to have 1.5 ounces weight, and you throw it in grass. And we'd go down there, and it was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then you bring that back home, and it works here. And then you go to the TVA, and we're cranking them on Guntersville, and then you bring that back home, and you're like, patterns. You just have to learn different techniques, and that's what's taught me more about my home pond. Is there's always different patterns on different bodies of water, but when you just fish your one pond the whole time, you get so dialed in on what everybody does, and hey, this is the one technique. You know, I mean, when you go to Murray, you got to be herring fishing and throwing a fluke, but you can go out there and catch them on a jig and spoon. You can catch them shallow on docks, go and throwing a horny toad on brim bed fish. Just fishing different lakes and bringing that pattern back home teaches you more about your home pond.
Wow. All right, man. A couple more questions, and then we'll let you go. I'm curious, what is the one thing that you're going to remember about this victory that's going to stick in your mind for a while?
That's a good question. The whole week in general was just unbelievable. I mean, because catching 25 pounds the first day was, I thought it was a fluke almost, because it was I left that first creek at like 10:30, 11 o'clock with like 17 or 18 pounds. And I'm like, man, you know, we're already at the bank. We just got to cash the check. I was like, let's just go to one area and see if we can just go get a big fish, because we've already reached what I thought was my goal. And I went to my next area and culled everything out to 25 pounds and was like, you know, that had to, everywhere you go, you just set the hook. It was a 3 and 4 pounder. And I mean, I probably caught 30 fish for those first 2 days and was like, this is a fluke, you know, just how unreal. Every time you just move, it was like the right decision. But I'd say breaking the 100-pound mark. I mean, that's always been a goal. I mean, you catch 100 pounds in 4 days. I'm like, man, that's always been a lifelong goal to achieve that belt. And my first victory, just that kind of gratification just kind of solidifies it a little bit, just the whole week in general.
Dude, you got to get one of those belts. I mean, seriously.
Did they give you a belt?
I don't know. They said, I think they make one and they'll give it to you later, but I promise you, I got to get one.
Dude, if it doesn't show up, Dave Smith is just right down the road from us. We can make that happen.
Just to put that in perspective, 104 pounds. Now, I understand that the back-to-back-to-back swing before that was brutally tough on a lot of guys. I mean, it was not easy to catch it. But you take Santee Cooper and Lake Chickamauga and Guntersville, and you combine all those three. So you had 18-12 at Guntersville, 42 at Santee Cooper, and 26 at Lake Chickamauga. You take those three events and combine them, you caught more weight in 4 days on Lake Fork than you did in Guntersville, Santee Cooper, and Chickamauga combined.
You know, it is weird to truly think about that, but Guntersville is what bites me every time. We have a love-hate relationship. It used to be one of my favorite lakes in the country, hands down. Like in college, I just love that lake. And then for some reason here lately, it's been pretty bittersweet. But Guntersville, I had a good chance at that tournament. I caught 14 pounds the first day. And the second day started slow. And execution is the biggest thing in fall fishing, I think. You know, you have to execute, and you got to catch what bites. And that second day, I fished completely poorly. I lost a 4-pounder flipping. I lost a 3-pounder on a jerkbait. I lost a good 2.5 on a fluke, and I lost another one that was like a 15-incher on a drop shot. And that was the difference that whole tournament of just completely falling out of it. So execution, like looking back, I'm almost at the whole season Gunnersville still sticks out because I've always learned more from the tournaments you do bad at or the ones you get your teeth kicked in. That's how I've always learned is when you get your teeth kicked in, you learn that lesson the hard way. You know, when you're catching fish, you don't really take away a lot sometimes, but those tough tournaments, those are the ones that make you want it even more.
Wow. Because, you finished third with 669 points, and Clark had 680 points. So, I mean, I know everyone loses fish throughout the year, but you look back on that swing right there.
Very tight.
Yeah, and Clark, absolutely. I wasn't even thinking about AOY. Even afterwards, I didn't even know I was that close. But just in general, just Gunnersville. I mean, last year I finished 56th. In the Classic, I didn't do good. It was, I don't know, that place.
Have you got
revenge for that one?
I mean, obviously you've done really well, but I mean, you're talking guys like Clark Wenlett and Jay Yellis, and we saw what Rick did. He's leading this after day one. Have you had these guys that have been doing this since before you were even born, like kind of be like, hey man, like, are you like cool with all them now? Like, you buddies?
I wouldn't say, yeah. I mean, we all talk now. That's the best thing about the elites now. It's a very tight knit group. Everybody likes everybody. Everybody's pretty close. And it was like, I mean, I call him Rick now, where I was, it was Mr. Clun. And like me and Ricky are talking backstage, and he actually gave me a map of Santee Cooper. It's a pretty cool story. After Gunnersville, he came over to me and was asking about, because Santee was the next tournament. And he brought this map over, and he's like, hey, Patrick, how do I run to PAX? And he showed me on this map. And I actually got it at the lake house. I would love to show you this map. And I showed him on the map, how to run. I'm like, you got to take this, run to this side. And I was like, thanks, I really appreciate it. And I'm looking at the map, and I'm like, Rick, where are these notes from? Because he had like writing like 4 to 6 pounder, these trees, these 3 dead stumps, very good, clear water back here. And I'm like, when did you write these? And he flipped it over, and he's like, it says 94. And I'm like, Rick, that was the year I was born. And he still had this map. And I said, Rick, I would love to buy this map off of you. Like I said, name a price. Like, I'm going to frame this because my home pond, the year I was born, I mean, it's Rick Clun's, the legend. Yeah. And this is the coolest thing I've ever found. He's like, no, it's not for sale. I don't want to sell it right now. We'll do something later. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I was like, if you ever want to sell it, I want first option at it. And then he ended up, I guess he thought about it, and he ended up giving it to Jesse Tacarante that next day. And I met Jesse at Santee because Rick called me, and he ended up giving me the map. And so I'm going to frame it and get him to sign it. It's just so little things like that. It's pretty cool.
That is awesome.
I think it's cool that Rick shows up with a paper map and asks you to mark it, how to run it. Hey, come over to the boat and put me some
little note. I'm like, when did you even write this? Like, I thought it was like recent. Like, he went there and pre-practice because I mean it was like faded, and I'm like, what was this map? And he flipped over. It was May of '94, and I was like, that's pretty.
That's
cool.
a cool story.
That is cool. I'm curious. You talk about the guys. Keith Combs, one of the best anglers on Lake Fork, finished second. What did he say to you afterwards, if anything?
He just said congrats. He said that was impressive. He said he never even threw a jerkbait in practice. And so that was the biggest thing. I knew the guys that were behind me, and that's why I truly never felt that I had a lead. I never looked at the lead at all. I didn't really care about it. I went out every single day like the weights were at 0 because Lee Livesey was behind me, Brad Watley, Keith Combs, Stetson. I mean, those guys know that lake. And I knew if I could go out there and catch 25, those guys could go catch 40. I mean, the fish truly do live there. The wind starts blowing in on a point. The bait moves in. And those fish, they're almost pelagic now. I mean, they get out there and they chase bait and stuff. And all it takes is just one dude pulling up on the right spot, right point, right bridge. And they throw crankbaits. They throw big fish baits. And they just pull in there and catch 35 pounds. And so I felt like I could not let my foot off the gas. I had to catch everything I could possibly catch.
All right, a couple questions from the instant feedback from the fans, and then we'll let you go. Dave wants to know, what do you think the shallowest that live scope is effective? And what about perspective mode?
I have no idea. Never used it. I'm going to say 1 foot for live scope. I caught that 6-pounder I caught the last day in the last 20 minutes. I caught it in 2 foot. So I could see it. The boat was sitting in like 6, and he was swimming in 2, and you could see him just roaming down the bank.
Wow, that's cool. All right, and then several people want to know, what kind of line were you using with the jerkbait?
I was throwing Subfix Advanced Fluorocarbon, and I had 12-pound and 14-pound. I was throwing both of them. I had 3 with 12, 3 with 14.
Did you go through the hook? Because you're talking about that. I'm curious. I mean, it's jerkbait season's coming up. What hooks were you putting on that thing?
I changed all my hooks. I was throwing some VMC, some different brands. Just there's some sharp ones out there. Some of the stock ones for some of those baits are pretty good. There are some good hooks out there, but I love sharp hooks. And I'm changing my hooks a bunch because, when you're throwing a bait a bunch and you're throwing around wood, it dulls them pretty quick sometimes. So I just change them as much as possible. And one thing I also did, and I don't know if this works or not, I mean, it might be stupid if you ask somebody else who actually throws jerk baits, like who knows them. A lot of the baits come with 3 6s. I ended up taking 3 of the 6s off and putting just 2 4s. That way, bigger hook, stronger hook, sharper, got more gap on there because those fish were just nipping at it. And so I was like, man, they're not going to bite the middle hook anyways. He's going to bite that back hook or he's going to eat that thing head first and grab the front one. I mean, when you're catching 5-pound fish, I was like, I'd rather have a meatier hook that has no flex to it and that when he gets it, I mean, he's done. So I switched to 2 4s and I thought it worked pretty good. I don't know if that is a common thing, but I thought it.
Have you ever done that, Brad?
No.
Because I was sick. That's big fish, and you have a thin wire hook like that, but then you're walking them around. So, I mean, had you ever done that before, or is that like a trick?
No, I did it the last day of practice because I was like, man, these are going to be some good fish, And the weeks prior, I've been throwing jerkbait for months now, and you can catch a 2-pounder sometimes, and if it's a smallmouth, you might get a little flex. And I mean, I didn't want a chance to have an opportunity at a world-class fish that could help me win a truck and have a little number 6 in there, and that thing just flex out and you lose them, So I wanted the biggest hook I could get away with. And if I would have done 3, then they would have been fouling up and the bait wouldn't have been right. So I just went with 2.
All right, what's up with the fish behind your left shoulder?
That's actually my personal best that I caught last year at Harris Chain. It's an 1128 that I caught.
Wow. I don't know, Bradley. I get this feeling he's going to have to build a bigger area for the number of hardware that he's going to collect over the next few years. So you might need a bigger space, man.
Well, the good thing is we are in the process of we're about to remodel the house. Emily's pretty happy about that. So don't give her too many ideas. I think she's slowly dwindling my space, and her space is getting bigger. She said something about a walk-in closet now, and I don't know about that.
Wow. All right, man. Just a great job. Hopefully you get that heavyweight belt very, very soon. They're really, really cool. Those things are awesome. Mm-hmm. And just an unbelievable job, I think, when we looked at the schedule and when they rescheduled a number of the events. If somebody was going to catch 100 pounds in the month of November on Lake Fork, I would have said no way.
Yeah, me
either. I promise you, I thought there was no way possible. I was talking with Garrett Paquette before the season, and he said, well, who's going to catch – what tournament's going to be the highest one? And I was thinking St. John's or like Santee during the spawn. And he said Fork. I said, dude, there's no way we're going to catch 100 pounds at Fork this year. And then they rescheduled, and I said, there's definitely no way anybody will catch 100 pounds. I mean, truly going into it, I was like, I'm going to go catch hopefully 15 pounds, have a chance at 17. And then when I started catching them, I was like, oh, my God. I had no idea this was what lived here. Every day it was just like eye-opening. You were like, holy crap. I mean, I'm doing something right.
I wonder how many people are going to throw jerk baits at Lake Fork over the next couple of weeks.
I imagine it's happening right now.
As we speak.
It started happening on day 3 and day 4. So I guarantee you it's starting to get pretty good out there.
Yeah.
Wow. Crazy stuff. All right, man. Appreciate you taking time out. Best of luck to you. Classic coming up here next year. It'll be here before we know it. And wish you the best, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. And look forward to hopefully being here again soon.
All right. Definitely going to happen. All right. Take care, Patrick.
See y'all.
All right. See you. Wow. He is becoming one of the top guys.
He may not have had AOY on his mind this year, finishing up with the Fork and the Win, but with that track record that he's got some AOY.
All right, that's what I wrote down.
Yeah.
I have, and not necessarily any order. Well, maybe in order. I have Wheeler. I'm talking young superstars,
Yeah.
right at 30 or below. To me, right now, Wheeler, Jordan Lee, and Brandon Polinick are the three. I'm not saying the other guy. There's not other guys that are a win or two away from being there. But as far as
How old is Lucas?
30-something.
Yeah, he's over 30.
But you also need he's got an Angler of the Year and he's got Elite Series wins. Okay, I'm talking about just hot right now.
He's
he
pretty
just won-
hot.
He just won the last
Lucas
one.
is pretty
Add
hot.
another name is all I'm
You're
saying.
gonna put Lucas. Lucas is kind of an old man
He is not.
compared to those guys. Okay, we'll
Not
throw
really.
Okay, we'll throw Lucas in there.
Not if you're as old as Mark and
It's
I.
gonna give Lucas a big head now. Jeez. So Lee, Wheeler, Polinick, and Lucas. Lucas is right there.
Yeah.
I think Walters could round out the 5 then, if we're gonna go 5. How do you not put him in there?
He needs an AOI.
He needs an AOY. Lee has
Classics.
classics and AOY on the BPT.
Yeah.
Polinick has AOYs, 5 Elite Series titles.
Yeah.
Wheeler has everything except a classic. Lucas has AOY, BPTs, FLWs, Co-Egglers too, and
Yeah.
Elite Series.
Yeah.
And I think Walters is the next one to join that list of those guys.
Yeah.
Do you not agree?
His numbers are incredible, dude. To have that many tournaments and to have no bombs, you're going to be in the AOY race every single year, and you're going to make the classic every single year if you continue down that path. Dude, those are
It's not
consistent numbers.
outlandish. I mean, I know the guy's. It's obvious he's the hot thing right now because he won the Open.
Yeah,
and
but
then
based
he won
upon
this,
his
and then he was
stats.
3rd in the Angler of the Year. But you talk about it. You talk about just the deal,
Hey,
man.
dude,
He's
I
in
saw
that
all
list.
this coming. Why you think he was on my fantasy team and he was less than
Now you're
2%?
Fantasy League savant.
Wow. All right. Hey, real quick on the instant feedback. I don't know if you guys knew about this. Matt in Alabama wanted me to address the fact that here recently, I think it was this past week, ESPN laid off over 300 people that were involved in all aspects of what they had going on. And he said, is this going to impact professional bass fishing in any way? I don't really think so, because the airing of what the Elite Series has on ESPN2 from a staffing standpoint, there's not a whole lot of personnel that's involved in getting what JM is doing to the feed on ESPN2. So I don't think that's going to have any. It's kind of sad. Do you know who Linda Cohn is?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
she
she's
played-
big hockey.
Yeah,
She's
was a
the hockey
goaltender.
one.
She was a goaltender in college. Mm-hmm. Anyway, she was doing the West Coast Sports Center last week, and I forget the other guy she was doing it with. Anyway, she has blonde hair now. She's got to be in her 50s. They're trying to get her to look like she's in her 20s. I really like how she does Sports Center and just her enthusiasm, anything. She's the one that announced the fact that her thoughts and the other guy, and I can't remember the other guy's name, that she was doing the West Coast Sports Center about the layoffs. Well, that is a result, unfortunately. The advertisers are not spending the money
Right.
that they've done in the past, and the COVID-19 situation, obviously, that's a big reason. But when you look at the state of our industry, being bass fishing, and how COVID-19, that situation actually helped so much, I am intrigued and really looking to see how 2021 is, especially with what I mentioned yesterday. If we get a vaccine by early 2021, is that going to reduce the amount of time that people are going to be spending on the water? Because now they have a choice. Now they're going to be doing other things if they do get that vaccine. So maybe let's be thankful for what this industry has done during these very, very challenging times. But most importantly, I am hopeful that so many people that went fishing for the first time or the second time continue their interest in this game, and the numbers still are there from a participation standpoint. But Matt in Alabama, as far as the layoffs at ESPN has an effect on bass fishing, I think it has zero effect.
Zero.
Yeah, I think we'll still see it. And besides, a lot of that whole thing was done because of the relationship that Mike McGinnis has with ESPN management. And the thing that would be interesting, though, Bradley, is to see the numbers from a viewership standpoint with the NFL going on, with everything else taking place, of which
Yeah.
when those first events aired on
Absolutely.
ESPN2, there was nothing going on.
Nothing going on. It was prime time. Yep.
Yeah, so we'll see. All right, Matthew, anything else?
No, I still think it was big that they were able to get on with the major sports going on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, because
Yeah.
a lot of
Open
people,
doors.
I mean, we even said it here, like, oh, well, that door's closed now that professional sports are picking back up, and boom, there it was. So that's half of their season that's been live on ESPN2 then.
Yeah. I just thought about this. As far as retaining the people that joined this game and took part in fishing during this COVID-19 situation, maybe some of the companies should realize that is a valuable asset and really work hard to keep those people interested. So we'll see what happens in 2021, and we will go from there. All right, folks, tomorrow we're going to continue. Great shows. We're going to have Clark Wendelin on, the man that got it done, Angler of the Year. I've known Clark for 30 years, man. I remember when the Oklahoma City Blazers were here in town. Clark's a huge hockey fan. The Blazers at the time, we actually got him an Oklahoma City Blazers.
They were a big league.
Jersey.
They're in the
won.
Guinness Book of World Records for the most people to attend a minor league hockey game.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
It was big time here.
Yeah. So he's a huge Dallas Stars fan. But most importantly, man, the guy has really, really accomplished a lot of things in this game, and one of the all-time greats in this sport, man. So Clark tomorrow. Then, folks, I want to let you know, obviously next week, Matt is going to be trying to fish on the third day, try to make the Elite Series. He will be gone all that week, and then next week, following that week is Thanksgiving. So what we're going to do, I counted them up, Matt. We have done 139 shows this year.
Wow.
It's a lot of shows. A lot of shows. So I've got some stuff that I've got to take care of from a health standpoint. I'm doing some tests next week, and I'm just going to take it easy for a couple of weeks. Enjoy the Thanksgiving holiday. Pull for Matt, pull for Brad. Hopefully they do extremely well at Lake Louisville next week in the Open. But for the first time all year long, we're going to take a well-deserved break and come back with some renewed vigor and enthusiasm when Matt gets back from Thanksgiving holiday. Are you going home? Are you going back to Illinois?
No, it kind of depends on what's transpiring during those weeks. I got an uncle who's not super healthy. My mom is not super healthy.
Yeah.
So just do the smart thing. So it might be a Zoom call. I might go home. Just kind of depends.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, tomorrow, Bradley, as always, dude, I know the fans love you being on the show and being in studio. A tremendous asset to what we do here at BTL, and you are welcome back anytime. So good luck next week at Louisville, man.
Yep. Appreciate it, guys, as always.
All right. That's it, folks. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, Clark Wendelin, and then we will wrap up the week and take a 2-week break here on BTL. Everybody be safe. That's it. We're out of here.